Welcome, everybody, to this week's show. I am your host, Russell Gibson. Adam Amy is on a well-deserved holiday and break. This is the You Can't Comp This NBA Trading Card Podcast. And this week, we're going to be doing a Not Timeless Moments. Now, my aim of today's show is to do 10 minutes of card content. I've set my alarm. It is now ticking. We're going to break down basically the NBA Finals. So we're going to do an SGA watch. We're going to check in on Haliburton. Unfortunately, he's injured his calf. Check in on that injury. We'll break down Game 5. We'll break down Game 6. Then we're going to end the podcast type feed and we're going to rip some packs live. Hopefully do some question and answers with some people that come on in. So guys, welcome everybody to the feed. Thank you so much for checking in. So I think the first thing that we should do today is talk a little bit of SGA. I think he is absolutely the man of the moment. I think if you are looking at hobby values and hobby prices, he is absolutely spiking hard at the moment. So we're currently looking at the Purple Ice PSA 10, number to 149 on this. This is a bit of an interesting one for me, just for the fact that it's somewhat of a, if you want to use the word niche, or if you would like to use the word, it's not the preferred card that you would normally be, chasing down. I think for me, the benefits of a card like this, a purple cracked ice, is that often you can get a little bit more affordability onto it. So what I mean by that is, I think for your value for money, it's just a lot better than, for example, comparing it to a silver. And so I think cards like this are really good to look at when, you can't afford to, say, get a silver card. You can't maybe afford to get a lower numbered card, or maybe, like, if I'm being perfectly honest, something is a little bit less aesthetically pleasing. I think for me, this is where the purples, the greens, the cracked ice light blue, that's another really good example of this too. Just cards become a little bit more affordable. So this to me is where I think cards is interesting, because there's always a price point for somebody. And I'm always, really happy looking at this. So for example, for me, I would say my bigger valued Luka cards are probably those ones that are not the more popularized one. So the one that I've got that comes to mind straight away, I've got the Ruby Wave. And so, I think that's a really good buy. So for example here, this is classic for Shea, isn't it? $500 buy-in, then you're on the Shea hobby train. That to me is very affordable. Really interesting on that. So if you're looking at this, direct numbers, the Ruby Wave really hasn't seen the fluctuation that other cards have experienced in that sort of SGA like window has it there. Yeah, so that's a perfect example of, why that I find these cards, really important for the hobby. I think let's just go back to the purple though. So there's one more thing I want to really quickly touch on that. So with the purple, so that's numbered to 149. Population on the PSA 10 is 25. Let's look at the PSA 9, because again, this is like for me where the affordability part comes into it. Population of that is 72. So look, I'm no numbers guy, but 97 of these have been sent to PSA out of the 149. Look, I'm a little bit skeptical on that, just for the fact. So 142 of the 145 have been sent, 149 have been sent off. This episode hasn't come out yet chronologically. However, it will come out very shortly. We actually interviewed Comron from GTI, and he was talking about some of the issues that PSA experiences. And, one of the things he talks about is, or his belief was, that they deliberately will give out 9s or less than 10 so that people will crack and then resub them again. So for me, that just screams of that. Like, I find it very difficult to believe that 142 out of the 149 have been pulled out of product. To me, that just doesn't make sense. For me, there has to be some absolute resubs here. So I wonder if the true population of this card, in terms of them being graded, maybe it's closer to 100 by the time you take into account there for the regrades. Anyway, back to what I was talking about with the PSA 9. Look, the buy-in here is still tricky, isn't it? We're still looking over $1,000. But I think if you're comparing that to the silver, for a second I was like, wow, the silver 10. So that's currently trading at 900. Yeah, so look, so basically to get a numbered card, you're actually going to have to go up a little bit on a silver, but then you're getting the security on the numbers there. So when I say security, what I'm meaning by that is it insulates you from this high population spike that we're currently seeing here with the silver, which is the population on the 10 is currently 693. Right, I think what we should do now is actually zoom in on this and have a really, really good look on it. In the last 12 months, he's up a lot. He's up 70%. The last 6 months, he's up 24%. Now, this is to me where it gets really interesting. So now he's down 24%. Now, we've spoken about this on the show previous times. What we spoke about was Jason Tatum. So we said, oh, this is crazy. He's gone into the NBA Finals and he's actually gone down. where maybe you're expecting him to go up. I absolutely would have expected Shea to be going up more, but he had such an exponential spike. I'm actually not surprised about this at all. And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I was seeing into the future on this, because I didn't. I completely missed all of this SGA stuff. Like, I was really conservative on him, and when he kept on going up and up, I was just like, where is this going to go? And so this for me is almost a little bit ironic, because I've actually almost like turned the door on this a little bit, and then actually I'm kind of like, maybe this is a guy to start buying into. Now he's actually dipping down a little bit. Yeah, but at the same time, I'm just not shocked. Like, he was up so much. And then I do think actually people use the NBA Finals as an exit. So people aren't using the NBA Finals to mark this as to get into somebody. They're like, right, I'm predicting this guy's going to get to the NBA Finals. There's going to be lots of buzz on this. Now is a good time to unload and list these cards. But I think the problem is a lot of people have that same idea. So in the last month, he's down 22%. Real dollar change is $270. I do think, though, the 3-month is probably, for me, the more relevant one, because I think that gives you a better idea of, really what's happened in this playoff period. He's down nearly 25% at a dollar change of 300. Alrighty, so let's just do a little bit of a breakdown of Game 5. I thought Game 5 was actually a really good game of basketball, and probably at the end of the day, I'm going to summarize this into 2 lines. The Pacers offense broke down in the fourth quarter. They just had too much isolation with Hallie, and they just couldn't generate enough points consistently. And then there was a period in the fourth quarter where SGA hit 5 points in a row, and that really just deflated the Pacers team. And then that was it. It was all over. So really, really tough game, I think, for the Pacers in that sense. I think we should look at Haliburton's injury. ESPN is reporting he has got a calf strain. He'll have an MRI, so that basically will rule him out for the rest of the finals. Look, maybe he comes back if there's a Game 7 or something like that, and they do something miraculous to him, but I can't see him coming back this NBA Finals just after reading that. If I can walk, then I want to play. I don't reckon they're going to roll him out. Like, can you guys see that? Honestly, I think that's such a tricky one. The problem with calves and strains is that they can then become tears and, significantly worse than what they were. And I think the other thing for me too is that I think teams put in so much preparation preparing for one particular player that when they actually do get a lineup change, actually that might throw the Thunder off a little bit. I think the question then becomes is like, how much of the load can Ben Shepherd take? Can Mathurin step up again and, put that massive output like he had the other day? Look, that's a really, really tricky one, isn't it? Alrighty, so let's move on. Let's talk about Tyrese Haliburton. So I think before I even look at his numbers, he is the ultimate up and down guy. I am going to say that he is going to be down. Let's see how much down he actually is, because with the finals coming around now, an injury, Haliburton, I actually think, is someone that you should be investing into. And the reason I say you should be investing into him is because I think he's a B+ to A prospect. And I also think, too, he's incredibly volatile. So you can literally just play the game of, jumping on and off him. So Silver PSA 10 is currently trading at a very reasonable $320. I actually think that is totally fine. The last 3 months, he is plus 82%. So let's just zoom out a little bit more to give us a bit more of a better understanding. At 1 year, he's minus 1%. Now, at 1 month, he's minus 20% for a real dollar change of 85, which is not unexpected by any means at all. Again, I think people using the NBA Finals as a target when to sell. Now, the PSA 9, I wanted to talk about this very deliberately because, if we're talking about affordability with cards, I know that people think PSA 9 is like the ugly sister of cards, but again, I think if you're buying the right card, the right player and the right card, almost no matter what the grade is, I still think there is, margin to be made, or it's still the right card to be purchased. I think the key with this card, though, is buying at the right time. So ironically, his Silver 9 is up 57% in 1 month, which is a little bit of a surprise for me. I think let's just go back and have a look at the all-time data on this, because I think this is probably the most significant. So basically the maximum was around that $75 mark and the minimum was around $30. Yeah. So I think the right price to be purchasing one of these is about at the $50 mark. Now, I think going into the off season, it's nearly back at $50 again. You might pick up one of these for $40 to $45, and that's pretty much it. Look, game 6, for me, there wasn't really much chop there at all. I think the problem that the Pacers had at the end of the day was just that for every game that I was anticipating that maybe 1 or 2 games in the series that the the Pacers would get 140, 135 points. I think this was just a really good defensive example by the Thunder. And really, it's as simple as that. Just nothing more to be said about that at all. All right, we're going to finish today's show on a card which I think is a really good one to talk about for a couple of reasons. This is from The Real Guy on Instagram, and he has compiled here some really good sales of Steph Curry. Now, I think that the aftermarket, or let's say the unlicensed market for tops, has been very mild. I think that's the best way to say it. I think what we probably can talk about with these cards here is this is a little bit of a loophole, or maybe where some cards have fallen through the system. So what we're looking at now is the Topps Now Olympics cards. Whilst they're not licensed NBA cards, the artwork on them is pretty good. I think someone like Tyson Beck probably could have done a better job of this again, but at the same time, I think they're aesthetically pleasing. I don't think there's any problem with the design. It's relatively clean. I think they've done a good job of isolating the athlete in the middle of the card. All of that all looks good. In addition to that, the on-card autograph and the one-of-one factor here is just amazing. I think for me that what really stands out here is the price differential between these two cards. So you've got the celebratory card selling for $80,000, and we've got the night card selling for nearly $520K. At the end of the day, is just what he's doing in that moment. And the Panini equivalent of this is the Timeless Moments card, isn't it? Which is what this segment is basically named after. I do think, though, if you're looking back at this in terms of, the data on the sales, you've got to say that there's a lot of room to move on that $79,000 card. And probably my suspicions is if you now put that card up for sale after we've seen the $518,000 sale, you're not going to get a price match, but you might even double your money in a very, very short period of time. So I think in terms of collectability, the Celebration card is an absolute home run. Whereas for me, look, obviously that's an amazing card, but is it worth $518K? Look, for me, the jury's absolutely still out on that. And I would probably suspect if you needed to make a rush sale on that, you're going to be, losing a bit of money there. Alrighty, guys, I think for today's show, we're going to finish this off right here. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's show. Our next episode, which is going to be going live on Sunday, is going to be an interview with Comron from GTI. And then the following week, Adam will be back from his very well-deserved rest. If you're in the YouTube feed, stick around. We're going to rip some packs, and then we're going to do some FC25 action too. Thanks, everybody, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.